the 26th of September, 1917. Carson's funeral took place about a week after his death, on a cold Wednesday afternoon. The chill in the air seemed to match the heaviness in my heart. The gathering was modest, yet intimate. My maternal uncle and aunt stood quietly, their 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl, huddled together, unsure how to process the solemnity of the moment. My neighbors offered brief condolences, their faces etched with sympathy. My father's friends, men of few words, showed up in their pressed suits, nodding quietly, while the few friends I had stayed close by, their presence offering silent comfort. And of course, my grandparents, how could I forget them? They stood at the front, their faces filled with both sorrow and pride, a reflection of the complexity of saying goodbye to someone who had given so much. "Let us begin," my father announced, his voice cutting through the murmur of the gathering. The solemnity in his tone made it clear that this moment was not one to be taken lightly. Everyone shuffled into their seats, even the children, who, just moments before, had been giggling and goofing around, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of Carson's death. Now, under the weight of my father's words, they fell silent, their earlier disrespect giving way to a subdued stillness. The air grew heavy, filled with an unspoken reverence as my father took his place at the front, ready to lead us through this painful yet necessary farewell. "Carson was my beloved child, and I miss him so badly already," he spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. The strength of his words cut through the air, bringing a palpable weight to the gathering. Though my father was known for his stern demeanor, even the strongest men can be brought to tears by grief. My mother stepped forward, her heart heavy with sorrow, and wrapped her arms around him in a comforting embrace. The raw vulnerability of that moment seemed to ripple through the crowd, and soon, she, too, succumbed to tears. It was a powerful reminder of how deeply loss can affect even those who appear resilient. Around us, the atmosphere shifted as half the people in attendance wiped their eyes and turned away to conceal their pain. I caught glimpses of my 4 living cousins, their faces streaked with tears, mirroring the profound sadness that enveloped our family. The sound of muffled sobs filled the air, each sob echoing the heartache shared among us all. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a collective moment of mourning, a testament to the love we all held for Carson. Each tear shed was a tribute to the boy who had brought laughter and light into our lives, now replaced with an emptiness that felt unbearable. In that sorrowful assembly, we were reminded that love, too, can be a source of pain, a burden we must carry as we remember our beloved Carson. My uncle stepped up to the podium, his presence commanding attention. As he cleared his throat, the air grew still, heavy with anticipation. "My brave nephew fought for all of you," he declared, his voice strong yet tinged with emotion. "Never forget that he died for this beautiful country and that he was the very definition of a hero." His words hung in the air, resonating with the gathered crowd, many of whom nodded in solemn agreement. I could see the pride mixed with sorrow on his face, a tapestry of emotions that encapsulated the essence of our loss. With a trembling hand, my uncle wiped away a tear that had escaped his stoic facade. His vulnerability broke through the barriers of grief, reminding us all that even the strongest among us feel the weight of such heartache. "That is all," he concluded, stepping back from the podium, the depth of his love for Carson evident in his pained expression. As he returned to his seat, a hush fell over the crowd, each of us grappling with the enormity of the sacrifice made by Carson. It was a moment that solidified the bond between us, a collective understanding of loss and the profound impact of Carson's bravery. At that moment, we were reminded not only of our grief but also of our shared duty to honor his memory by cherishing the values he fought for: courage, sacrifice, and love for our country. My cousin David walked up to the podium, and I braced myself for what was sure to be an awkward moment. Known for his mischievous sense of humor, David had a knack for finding laughter in the most inappropriate situations. I couldn't help but think back to the countless times he had cracked jokes about flatulence, treating it as if it were comedy gold. As he adjusted the microphone, a sheepish grin spread across his face, and I felt a rush of anxiety wash over me. I wasn't sure if this was the right time for his usual antics, but I knew David could never resist the temptation to lighten the mood. Well, he began, his voice surprisingly serious. I know Carson would have wanted us to celebrate his life, not just mourn his passing. The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. He always had this way of making even the dullest days fun. Like that time we had a picnic, and he started a food fight. Let's just say, we had more mustard on our faces than in our sandwiches. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, and I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. David was threading a delicate needle between humor and respect, and it seemed to be working, at least for now. He taught us that life is too short to take everything seriously, David continued, his demeanor shifting to one of earnestness. Carson believed in laughter even in the toughest times, and I think he'd want us to carry that spirit forward. As he finished his speech, the initial laughter faded into a poignant reflection. David had managed to evoke memories of Carson's joy and light-heartedness, reminding us that even amid sorrow, we could celebrate the life he lived. I realized that sometimes, laughter and grief could coexist, each amplifying the meaning of the other. In that moment, David reminded us all of the legacy Carson left behind, a call to live fully and to find joy, no matter the circumstances. The funeral concluded soon after David's speech, and as we gently lowered Carson's coffin into the pre-dug grave, a profound weight settled in my chest. Watching it descend into the earth felt like a physical manifestation of my grief, an unbearable reminder that he was truly gone. It killed me to think that he would never again crack a joke to soften the grim atmosphere, never again light up a room with his laughter. At that moment, I was struck by how much he resembled the pivotal characters in the stories I had read, those vital figures whose absence left an irrevocable void. Carson had always been the hero of my narrative, the one who showed up with a smile and a witty quip, even on the darkest days. He was my confidant, my mentor, and above all, my brother. Losing him felt like losing my entire world, a vibrant tapestry suddenly unraveled, leaving only frayed edges of memory behind. As the dirt began to cover the coffin, I could almost hear Carson's voice echoing in my mind, filled with encouragement and humor. I wanted to shout for him to come back, to remind me of all the moments we shared, the late-night conversations, the silly pranks, the times he taught me how to ride a bike. Each memory hit me like a wave, crashing into the shore of my mind, leaving me breathless and disoriented. I looked around at the somber faces of family and friends, all of us united in our shared loss. There was something profoundly heartbreaking yet comforting in the communal grief. We were all here because Carson had touched our lives in ways that would never fade. As the final shovelful of dirt fell onto the coffin, I realized that while he was physically gone, the essence of who he was would remain forever etched in my heart. I silently vowed to honor his memory by carrying his spirit with me, by finding moments of joy even in the depths of sorrow. With that resolve, I stood tall, pushing back the tears, and whispered a silent farewell to the most important character in my life, knowing that his legacy would live on in the laughter we would continue to share. "Come, sweetheart, the funeral's over," my mother gently reminded me, her voice tinged with a soft sadness. I lingered, caught in a moment I desperately wished could stretch into eternity. The weight of loss was heavy on my heart, and the thought of leaving felt like abandoning a piece of myself. Yet, I knew I couldn't stay forever. It wasn't as though I could revive him now, could I? Reluctantly, I turned away from the grave, taking one last, lingering glance at the fresh earth that now rested over Carson. It felt like a betrayal to leave him there, a finality I wasn't ready to accept. My mother's hand on my shoulder was both a comfort and a reminder that life, relentless and unyielding, continued, even in the face of such profound sorrow. As we walked back toward the gathering, the sounds of quiet conversations and muffled sobs surrounded us like a heavy blanket. Family members exchanged sympathetic glances, their expressions reflecting the shared grief we all felt. I looked up at my mother, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and felt a pang of guilt for my sadness. She had lost a son, and I had lost a brother. Our grief, while intertwined, was also painfully individual. "Let's go home," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence that had enveloped us. I nodded, allowing her to guide me away from the grave and back into the world beyond this moment. Each step felt weighted as if the very ground beneath my feet was pulling me back, reluctant to let me leave the memories of Carson behind. As we approached the car, I couldn't help but glance back one last time, wishing with all my heart that I could hear his laughter echoing through the trees or see his infectious grin lighting up the summer day. But there was only silence now, a void that would never be filled. Once inside the car, I sat in silence, staring out the window at the passing landscape, my mind swirling with memories of Carson, the adventures we had, the secrets we shared, the way he could turn any dull moment into something extraordinary. I realized that even though he was gone, the lessons he taught me and the love he shared would remain with me, a constant presence in my life. As we drove away from the cemetery, I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I wouldn't let Carson's memory fade. I would honor him by living fully, laughing freely, and cherishing the moments we had shared. In that way, he would never truly leave me. At dinner, we gathered around the table, the rich aroma of ravioli wafting through the air, a comforting embrace that reminded me of simpler times. It was a cherished family favorite, and on nights like these, it felt like a warm hug from the past. Nothing could compare to the joy of a steaming plate of ravioli, filled with savory goodness and topped with a hearty marinara sauce. The clinking of forks and the cheerful chatter of my younger cousins filled the room. "Ravioli night," they exclaimed in unison, their faces lighting up with anticipation. I couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. The sight of their eager faces brought a sense of normalcy to an otherwise heavy day. The kids would all agree with me on that. There was something uniquely special about this meal that transcended the mundane. As I took my first bite, the familiar flavors danced on my palate, transporting me back to countless family dinners shared around this very table. My mother would often tell stories about how she and her siblings would race to finish their plates, vying for the last of the ravioli, and I could see that same spirit reflected in my cousin's playful competition tonight. "Who can eat the most ravioli?" my cousin David challenged, a mischievous grin plastered on his face. Laughter erupted around the table, momentarily lifting the weight of our recent sorrow. I joined in the laughter, even as a small part of me felt guilty for enjoying this moment amidst the lingering grief. As we continued to eat, I noticed my father watching us, his expression a blend of nostalgia and pride. He may have been a stern man, but moments like these revealed a softer side. The laughter of the children reminded him of his childhood, perhaps even of Carson, who would have loved this playful banter. "All right, let's not turn this into a ravioli eating contest," he interjected with mock seriousness, a twinkle in his eye. "We still have dessert to get to." His words elicited more giggles, and I felt a surge of warmth at the realization that even in our grief, joy could still find its way into our hearts. Dinner progressed, filled with jokes and stories, the sound of forks scraping against plates mingling with laughter. Each bite of ravioli seemed to weave us closer together, reminding us that despite our recent loss, family and food held the power to comfort and heal. As we finished our meal, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. At this moment, surrounded by loved ones and comforted by a shared favorite dish, I realized that while Carson was no longer with us, the bonds we shared, through laughter, love, and even the simplest of meals, would carry us forward. It was time for bed, and unlike other nights, I chose not to read a book or sift through my biology textbook. Instead, I simply lay there, closing my eyes and waiting patiently for the Sandman to arrive. And arrive he did.